Learning Ally is a proud sponsor of the Empowered Dyslexia podcast. Learning Ally, a nonprofit education organization, helps to transform the lives of struggling learners by delivering proven solutions that help students reach their potential. We have a heritage of supporting students with a reading deficit like dyslexia. Our award-winning human-read audiobook solution helps students in grades 3 through 12 access books they want and need to read to help them succeed. Visit www.learningally.org for more information.
The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional legal advice, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your attorney, advocate, physician, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding any medical or educational concerns.
Hello and welcome to Empower Dyslexia. I'm your host, Stephen Yearout, and on this show, we're here to help you become a better informed partner in education. We talk about dyslexia and all the related disorders to dyslexia. We talk about intervention. We talk about research, special education policies at the local, state, and federal level. We also interview experts in their field. And my favorite part is we also love to speak to people with personal stories about how dyslexia and learning disabilities has affected their life, how they dealt with it. Please make sure that you like us on Facebook and YouTube. Leave us a comment. If you like to watch the shows, we are on Facebook Live and YouTube Live every Thursday. And you can get the audio version of Empower Dyslexia on all of our favorite apps for podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, you name it, we're there. So we have a good one for you today. We have a returning guest, my good friend, Dr. Kelli Sandman-Hurley. She has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to remediation and dyslexia, not only in children, but adults, and how to provide a remediation for them. And she has spent a great deal of her career trying to help, our population, children and adults, to get that remediation. So she received her doctorate in literacy and specialized in reading from San Diego State University and the University of San Diego. She's a co-founder of the Dyslexia Training Institute. She's a certified special education advocate. She is known for helping children or parents get their children's IEP done correctly, make sure that their goals are set appropriately. She's trained in meditation. She serves as an expert witness in areas of dyslexia. She's trained in multiple different remediation programs. She's the past president of the International Dyslexia Association, the San Diego branch, a dyslexia consultant who works with ISDs, school systems, in order to make sure that they're providing the most appropriate services for our children with learning disabilities. She's a co-creator, and this is actually how I got introduced to Kelli, or Dr. Sandman-Hurley. She was the co-creator of Dyslexia for a Day, which if you haven't seen that video, please go out to YouTube and search for it. It's amazing to see a group of teachers get to understand what our population, our children with dyslexia, our children that have learning disabilities get to go through in a classroom setting. She is frequently asked to speak at conferences. She has an amazing, or now she has a couple of amazing books. So she's an author also. And we are honored and happy that she is here with us again. So welcome, Dr. Kelli Sandman-Hurley.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me back. And you can just call me Kelly.
So for our audience, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, a little bit more about your education? Why did you choose to start working with our population, children with dyslexia?
So I started working, my passion came from working at the adult literacy program of the San Diego Public Library, where I worked there for 12 years. So we worked with adults from 18 to 90 years old who would come to the library to be matched with volunteer tutors. And they would come to my office, and my primary job was to do their initial intake assessment and talk to them a little bit about their literacy skills and their strengths and their weaknesses. And, they would just come to my office, and I would, a lot of times, be the first person they ever told. And so they would sit in my office and just cry about their literacy struggles and cry about how it's affected their lives and their families and their, financial positions and things like that. And so, I met my business partner, Tracy, there. We both worked there. And then we thought, we should really start an organization where we can help kids before they become these adults with dyslexia. So it started with the adults. And if I'm completely honest, the adults are really where my passion has always been. I'm extremely passionate about adults with dyslexia. But that leads to my passion to make sure that kids don't become those adults who didn't get the help and the remediation. So really all of my motivation comes from those adults at the library.
One of my favorite sayings is a child who has dyslexia that has not been remediated grows up to be an adult with dyslexia that has not been remediated. So anything that we can do to stop that struggle and provide those services for our children, we're changing lives. It is life changing. Real quick, you're in San Diego, and I've been hearing that California, the legislation there has a bill coming up, SB 614. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So that is a bill that is proposing to remove the RICA test. And the RICA test is a test that teachers here have to take to show their competence in understanding how to teach reading. And that's where they have to show that they understand the importance of structured literacy. They don't really call it structured literacy, but all of those components are in that test. So right now they want to remove that test because they are citing that it's not culturally sensitive. So a lot of persons of color who are taking it aren't doing well on it. And it doesn't really, their argument is that it doesn't really have there's not the numbers to prove that if you can pass that test, you become a better teacher of reading. So they're trying to remove it so it becomes a little bit easier to become a teacher, but they are saying that they are putting other things in place to make sure that a teacher is still being assessed for those components of reading, to make sure that they understand the components of reading that are important. But it's really, I don't really think that that is enough, because what they are putting in place of the test seems to be a little arbitrary and left up to the teachers, the colleges of education. So they want to remove the RICA basically just to make it easier to become a teacher and not really have a lot of oversight to make sure that the structured literacy components are still there.
Well, I mean, we already have tests with the NAEP scores that show that right now what we're doing is not working. So we definitely don't need to go backwards.
Right. No.
So we
don't need to make it easier. I don't understand. I mean, it doesn't make sense to always, when you have the hardest to teach, why are we constantly putting the least qualified or the least trained to teach the hardest to teach? It doesn't make sense. We should be making it harder to be a teacher, to work with someone who's struggling, in my opinion. Harder in a good way.
And harder, I look at harder as it's kind of relative. If you've been trained properly, it isn't harder.
Right.
So You have been on a mission over the last, or since I talked to you originally, since you were on the show originally, you have been doing a lot of research for a book, and you're talking to adults with dyslexia.
Yes.
Why did you, I mean, obviously, in your introduction, you said that that is really your passion around adults. But why did you choose that topic on the book? And, how many people did you talk to in your research?
So I've been lucky enough to meet with 50 different adults. They're all fascinating. So I've met with everyone from inmates in a California state prison to really, really accomplished artists to people getting their PhDs and everything in between. So I've met 50 of them and spent at least an hour, 45 minutes to an hour with each one. And then a little bit of emails back and forth on top of that. So it's been really, really awesome. I chose this topic because, like I said before, it is my passion. But what I was, as an advocate, and I'm sitting in IEPs at schools, and I'm feeling like they weren't really taking it seriously. And as someone who'd been in adult literacy, I knew what the lifetime repercussions are of struggling in school. And I just didn't feel like the urgency is there. Like you said earlier, they're not really thinking about everything they're doing is going to affect that child into adulthood. And so I really wanted to take their stories, the adult stories, and what I'm trying to do is use those stories, find common themes throughout the stories, and then translate that into practical advice and information for current parents and teachers. So I'm asking all the adults, what would they do differently? What would they tell their fifth grade self? What was the most helpful, the least helpful? Asking them specific words for specific events and stories. And then I have themes now, and my hope is that their stories and opening up to me will actually help somebody who's currently struggling.
Absolutely. It absolutely will. I mean, that's the part of the reason why we have this show, because those of us that have made it through it need to understand that there's always people that are in the middle of it.
100%.
And we need to be going back and grabbing as many hands as we can, and helping them make it through that dark tunnel, because that is what it is. It's a dark tunnel, and a lot of people are stuck and can't move forward, and they're petrified. They're frozen with fear, and they don't move forward. I was having a conversation with my son's principal, and we were talking about dyslexia, and I asked him, I said, so what have you ever, being a principal, what have you been taught about a student who is dyslexic, has ADHD, and drops out of school? And he just kind of sat there and looked at me. And then he goes, well, nothing good will ever come of it. And I go, well, you're looking at him. And I wanted to say that to him. I want him to understand that if we don't get it right in school, you're going to be looking and dealing with those adult parents of children who have dyslexia.
For sure.
So,
and he revealed some implicit bias in that response as well. There's a little bit of bias as to whether or not that student will ever actually read or spell or do anything.
Well, I mean, we're taught that when I was back in school, we were always taught if you can't read, write, spell, do math, you're not going to be successful. And that holds partly true. However, we can provide those services. We can teach these kids to read, write, spell. We can have higher expectations for these children when it comes to education. I think that we have chosen to not have these higher expectations because it's work. It's hard work to make sure that these kids get the things that they need. But then they turn in, like you said, they turn into adults who struggle. And you were talking about, they feel like their place in life or their status in life has been affected because their ability to read, write, and spell that was completely me. I mean, there was a lot of things that I chose not to even attempt because of that fear and being exposed. So while you were doing before you started your research and started having these interviews, what did you think was going to be the consensus of what information you were getting? What was your thoughts about the information you were going to get?
Well, I feel like I thought when I went into it, I thought I was going to I had a good idea of what I was getting into because of my prior experience at the library, but I guess when I was at the library, I didn't ask these types of questions. So I thought I would get, a lot of information about like poverty and making bad decisions and things like that. But what I found was there's two roads. There's the road of those who had the resources and the support, and there's the road of those who didn't. So I did find two different stories. So I think there's two different stories in the dyslexia world, and they all have to do with resources and parents. So you either have parents and resources, or you don't have, or you have parents but no resources. And if you don't have parents and resources, your trajectory is far different than if you did. So I guess and I also came out a little like, when I wrote Dyslexia Advocate, I was pretty frustrated as being an advocate with the way the educational system is towards kids with dyslexia. But now I'm even more agitated because it hasn't changed. So I interviewed adults who were, up to 75 years old and adults who were 19 just to see if there was any discrepancy in how they were treated. And it's basically the same story. So basically nothing's changed. And I thought that was really interesting as well. There's still so far to go, and the impact that we have on these students never leaves them. So I'm far more passionate about what I do now than I thought I was going to be at the beginning of this based on what the adults told me. That makes sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you were telling me that you interviewed some people in prison.
Yes.
How was that? What was that like?
That was fascinating. So I've always been fascinated by prison. I'm not sure why, but I consider myself lucky enough to be able to go to I think it was a medium security prison in Northern California. And I met some inmates. I got to observe some classrooms. I talked to all the teachers, and then I met with some inmates, and that was really interesting. I had one gentleman who was relatively young tell me that he was actually there because he had dyslexia. So his story was that he was signing a paper. He thought he was buying a car legally. And then he drove away and he got arrested because he couldn't read what he wrote. And apparently he just stole a car. So, and I asked him point blank, I go, do you think you're here because of your dyslexia, your inability? Because I think he was probably pretty unable to read at all. And I said, do you think you're here because of that? And he said, 100%. I am 100% in jail because I can't read and spell. So I've heard that story before, but to hear it being in that situation, in that environment had a huge impact on me. And, he's just, you could see it in his eyes. He was just, what am I going to do? Like, he's just defeated.
So there is there's a movement right now in the dyslexia community to have, it really is more of a supportive. I understand the concept behind it, but they're trying to be supportive and get people not to be ashamed of being dyslexic, which you shouldn't be ashamed because it is what it is. We just got to get you the appropriate interventions and move forward. But did anybody in your interviews, did they think of, how did they view themselves having dyslexia? How did they view dyslexia? I guess that's the best way to ask it.
It really depended. I would say out of the 50, 45 of them viewed it as something that caused them great harm, social and emotional distress for most of their lives. A lot of them thought they would be doing something else if they didn't have dyslexia. So several people said they would have gone to college instead of doing what they're doing if they didn't have dyslexia. A lot of them are scared that they're going to be quote unquote found out at work or things like that. I did have one gentleman whose granddaughter has dyslexia, and I asked him, did you ever tell your granddaughter? She'd probably like to know but you're also struggling, so she doesn't feel so alone. It's like, oh, no, I'm not going to tell her. So there is still shame involved in it. There's a lot of frustration. I did have one adult who you actually met at our conference who was pretty angry about his experience. I think they feel shortchanged. They know they're smart. They know they could have done other things. So some of them are extremely frustrated when they look back on what they didn't get. So there's just a lot of feelings that they really got shortchanged in life because of their dyslexia, and they really didn't get what they needed. And I think that's really frustrating to them as well.
It's really amazing that how not being able to read, write, spell, not being able to be successful in school, how that carries over into your home life, into your behaviors at home, in your behaviors in school, and the mental stress and strife that it puts on that student, and therefore puts it on the family and everything else, and how that really, I don't want to say dictates, but it guides the rest of what else is going on if you're not being provided the help that is appropriate to give you the skills to remediate your dyslexia. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I interviewed my mom, and that show was called Dyslexia Stole My Life. And it was kind of tongue in cheek, because when you look at the stress and the pain that we went through emotionally in our household, and it was directly related to my struggles in school, mm-hmm. and how that filtered over into just about everything else that happened in my life until, later on. So, to discount or not think that providing the appropriate reading remediation in, third grade, second grade, whatever, to think that, oh, we can get to it later, or you'll be okay, you'll make it through it, I think is malpractice at best. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they and the other thing too is when they don't get an intervention and you're just kind of throwing everything at the wall to see what will stick, they keep failing every single thing that you're throwing at the wall. They know they're failing it, and they're internalizing that. So if you're going to pull a kid out of class, make sure that what you're going to be doing during that time is actually going to work, because they know when it doesn't work, and every single time it doesn't work, it just creates more and more internal emotional distress. So don't think that they don't understand what's going on. And then the other thing is we're really failing to talk to them about why we're doing what we're doing, what the program is, why they're doing the program, what dyslexia is, how it affects them. Instead, we're just pulling them out and then starting to teach them reading. But we're not really talking to them and acknowledging their struggle and acknowledging their experience and acknowledging how hard this is for them. We just start teaching, and they know that. And I always ask them, did anybody ever ask you if it was working? And they said, no one ever asked me if it was working. No one ever asked me how I was doing. No one ever asked if it was improving my reading, anything like that. So we need to build those relationships with them as well, because they feel very, very isolated, and they feel very misunderstood and very different. They don't like feeling different.
Well, all we want to do is basically read just like everybody else. We know that we have the ability to do as good or better than the rest of the people in the room. Mm-hmm. However, we can't because of this one thing.
Right.
And it's very frustrating. I mean, I'm part of an adult support group for dyslexia. And just like you were saying, the stories, you basically could remove that person's name and stick somebody else's name in there. Mm-hmm. And they're still so hurt. I was going to say bitter, but really it's hurt. I mean, when you peel back the onion, they're hurt, they're afraid, they don't want to be a failure anymore, and they're not going to do and or face dyslexia. They're not going to face this anymore because they don't want to fail.
Right. They're traumatized. The word trauma came up a lot. So, and I didn't feed them any words. I was very clear about just giving open-ended questions, and they used the word trauma quite a bit. I thought that was very telling. School's traumatizing.
I can definitely tell you that it's traumatizing. I mean, I think you and I were having a discussion, and I was talking about going back to my youngest son's elementary school, which happened to be the same elementary school that I went to. And walking down the halls, I could remember the things that were said to me and where it was in the building, because the school hasn't changed a whole lot. And I remember walking and I was like, what are all these feelings that I mean, because it was weird. I was starting to have anxiety and wanted to basically get out. You know, I needed to leave the school because it was like a rush or a wave of emotion that was coming over me. And then I was like, I'm starting to feel or remember all of these things. And I had to talk myself down as I'm walking through the hall to go have a meeting with my son's teacher. And I mean, that is trauma.
It is. Yep.
And, you know, we live with it day in and day out. And these adults that need the help, if we can really convince them that what we're going to do is going to work, the thing I always say, don't believe the lie. You can be taught to read, write, and spell properly, just like everybody else. Maybe not the same format in teaching you, but you can do the activity just like everybody else. And when I personally went through remediation, it was as if somebody turned the light switch on, and it is life-changing. So
yeah, well, and then when they find someone who gets it and understands them, it is life-changing. But you have to take that time at the beginning to develop that relationship before you just jump into any kind of intervention.
Absolutely.
You can't just keep going. You have to build a relationship because they've already don't trust you from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, meeting some of the adults that I've met, and you know, it's heartbreaking. I mean, they're grown men coming up to me and crying after speaking and saying, you know, you told my life story. How did you know? Because it's the same story. It's the same no matter what year you were born in, what continent you were born in. It's the same. This is a human problem that we can provide, and I keep beating this in. We can provide the appropriate, you know, backed by science intervention and allow these adults and children to be able to perform and be the best versions of themselves. So you did all these interviews with these 50 adults. Was there anything that was that had changed what you initially thought you were going to get out of it, the information you were going to get out of it? What was a couple of the glaring things that came out of all your interviews?
Oh my gosh. One of the most important things that I say now is if you don't hear anything else that I say, please hear this. Never, ever, ever make a student with dyslexia read out loud, ever, unless you're in a one-on-one situation that is controlled and you are the teacher and student relationship. I always ask every single person that I met with, use one word to describe reading out loud. And it was trauma, terrifying, anxiety. I hated it. I'd run out of the room. I wouldn't do it. And then they could give me an example of reading out loud like it happened yesterday. So there really is no educational purpose for making someone just randomly read out loud in front of their peers anyway. So that was something that came out of it. I already kind of knew that, but I really hadn't realized how much it had traumatized them. So that's definitely one thing. The other thing is the spelling issue. I asked every single person, do you think spelling is important? And if so, has it ever caused you any embarrassment or held you back? And emphatically yes across the board. Yes, it's important. Yes, it holds me back. Yes, I'm embarrassed by it. Yes, I can't do this and I can't do that. And I've had to do things in public. One of my interviewees was publicly shamed by his supervisor. So, it's really, they really are not, spell check is not helpful to them. I interviewed this really popular artist last week, and he actually said, I can, what did he say? He said, I can beat spell check every time. He's like, I can spell a word so poorly that spell check can't get it every single time. But spelling has been a really big problem for them, a lot of embarrassment, probably more so than not being able to read very well. So I think that's a big one. And I always preface that story with, the reason I asked that question is because I've been in IEP meetings, one in particular, where we were with a group. I was listening to the team talk to the parent about how it's not important to teach spelling anymore. We've got technology, no one cares, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, oh my God, everybody at this table can spell. And here they are making a judgment about this kid being able to spell or not. I'm like, no. I worked with adults before this. I know spelling is important. So the spelling issue came up, the reading out loud came up. They feel really isolated, a lot of isolation issues. They feel like after they graduate from high school, they're just kind of left twisting in the wind. There's nothing left for them. There's not a lot of support for them out there. If they didn't go to college, they really struggle if they didn't have any support. Some people were lucky to go to college and have a lot of accommodations. Not everybody, for sure. There's so much. I learned so much.
The spelling is that was huge for me.
Huge.
I was sitting in a 504 meeting, and one of the accommodations that I asked for while my son was going through remediation was not taking off for spelling. And the same thing for when they're doing tests, and they're like, oh, we can't do it for tests. I go, well, if you can do it in the classroom, you can do it for tests. And they said, oh, well, we can give them a dictionary. I said, you can give them a stack of dictionaries, but if you can't even come close, what's the use? Just like you were saying, Google going out and trying to use speech to text, if you can't even get close, or you're typing in trying to figure out what it is, if you can't even get close, then you got to do what I became famous for, was completely rewriting what it was I was trying to say, because I couldn't spell one word.
Right.
I got to figure out another way to say it.
Which isn't an adequate representation of your intellect.
Right.
They're not really showing the world what you were really thinking.
And then, as far as the reading out loud, I mean, that carries over into adulthood too. I told the story at y'all's conference about, I was in a new hire with a very large company. And they go, okay, everybody grab your book and everybody stand up in the circle, and we're going to go around and we're going to round robin read. And I was transformed into, an elementary school kid who I'm sitting there counting how many people are in front of me and where it was that I was going to have to read. And I didn't hear anything that was said from the time that she said, we're going to read and everybody's going to take a turn. Because I was sitting there rereading the paragraph that I had to read to make sure that I didn't expose myself with, hey, my reading is not so good. Mm-hmm. So, that carries over. And I mean, at a new hire, if you go in there and butcher the paragraph reading, all your new hires and, the HR staff are all going to look at you and go, should we really hire this person? Mm-hmm. And then you're going to go ahead.
There's no value in that. I mean, what's the purpose in reading out loud like that? That's just lazy. That's laziness on the part of the instructor.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's unnecessary stress on the individual.
Yes.
So when does your book come out?
A year from this month, hopefully. I'm starting the writing process now.
So is there anything else that, during this process that you have come away with? What's the top thing that you came away with after doing all of these interviews?
Oh my gosh. They do not consider dyslexia a gift. They do consider it. So one thing that's really interesting is they don't consider it a gift as a child. As an adult, they can see that the obstacle of dyslexia has made them who they are, and they wouldn't change that. They are glad that they had, in a way, glad that they had the hardship that they had to overcome, because they believe it made them who they are today. And like I said, they wouldn't change that. But they don't think that they should be telling kids that it's a gift when the kids are struggling. So that was really, really important, because the word gift has a positive connotation to it. And so I think it's okay to definitely give kids role models and say, well, let me go back. One of the things that I did ask is I said, what would you tell your fifth grade self? So if you could go back and tell your fifth grade self something, what would you tell them? And almost all of them said, it's going to be okay. So just let them know it's going to be okay is almost better than telling them you're going to be this, and this because you have dyslexia. Instead, say it's going to be okay. You're going to get through this. And when you get through it, you're going to be a better person. I think that was a really important message that I got from it.
You just gave me chills, because those are basically all my answers.
Oh, good.
I would tell my fifth grade me, hey, dude, you're going to make it through it. Don't worry. Put your head, keep your head down, power through it. Don't give up. Keep moving forward. Just because you feel like you can't do it anymore, you're stronger than what you think you are.
Yes.
And
don't listen to people saying things to you that aren't true.
As far as the gift piece of it, I feel like the strengths that we as dyslexics have come away with because of the disability, I look at them, I think anybody that doesn't have a disability can have those same gifts, those same strengths, I should say. However, we got them out of necessity. We got them out of survival, because we had to do something to be, try to have some type of success. So, what a lot of people, I don't know if they don't realize it, or they don't understand, they think about it or whatever. When a child hits that third grade wall, it's not because they've been struggling reading for 1 year. They've been struggling and failing in school for 4 years if they started in preschool. And we've been dealing with dyslexia since we were born. Mm-hmm. So there is lots of years of already built up anxiety and frustration and failure that we're dealing with at that third grade wall. And that's the reason why, most schools would say, oh, we can't test for dyslexia until they're in third grade.
Ridiculous.
Not true.
Not true.
So,
can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
Sorry. I do want to differentiate the adults that I interviewed who I think are on the profound side definitely have a different experience than the adults who are mild to moderate. So I think the mild to moderate will see themselves more positively as adults, but the people that I interviewed who were really profoundly dyslexic are really not happy about it at all. Their life trajectory was much different than those who are moderate to mild. So when I talk about they're happy that they are who they are today, that really only applies to the mild to moderate. My students that were really, really severe are not happy about where they are, and especially the ones that are in prison. So I think that's really important to differentiate, because the continuum of dyslexia does matter, and it matters a lot in what happens to the student as they become an adult, because mild to moderate is going to be easier to accommodate than someone who's profoundly dyslexic.
I would also add in something that you talked about earlier, was that level of support.
Right. Oh, 100%.
So if you don't have a level of support, that mild to moderate dyslexic will have, I guarantee you, has the same outlook and feelings about his or her disability as somebody that was profound.
Right. Well, the support and the home support and the advocacy is huge. If you don't have that, you just go through your life thinking that there's something wrong with you, or there's not something wrong with you, but you don't have the skills to do what you really want to do. And then you end up in bad situations. Not all the time, obviously. That's not a generalization to everybody, but just the people that I spoke to.
Absolutely. I mean, this is because I lived it, I went through it. This is something that obviously is near and dear to my heart, that I want to try to help that population heal those scars. Well, I wouldn't even say they're scars, they're open wounds, because when you talk to them, they're still dealing with those feelings day in and day out. So, well, I'm excited to be able to read your book as soon as it comes out. I personally want to tell you, thank you so much for all that you do for our population and the dedication, the life dedication that you've given to our adults and children with learning disabilities. We need more people coming into the profession to help, and that are strong advocates to make sure that we get the help and services that we need. So from me to you, thank you so much for all that you do.
Well, thank you for all that you do as well. I really appreciate it.
So I want to extend the the invitation to come back on the show. I love having you on the show. I love having our conversations about all the great things that the Dyslexia Institute is doing, and how we can, partner up and help our population. So please come back on. And we're just about out of time. So I, want to take this time to remind our viewers and listeners, please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and leave us a comment on both. It really helps us with our sponsors. Again, if you like to watch it, our Empower Dyslexia, you can watch it on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, and then you can receive the audio version on any of the favorite apps that you like to get your podcasts on. And at the end of each show, we like to always recommend that if your child is struggling in school and you think there's a possibility that they may have a learning disability, don't wait. Get the process started on getting your child tested. It is and should be a fairly easy process. We have a letter template on our website, www.empowerdyslexia.info, that you can download, put your information in, turn it into your school counselor, and get the process started. You'll be very happy and relieved to understand exactly what's going on with your child, so you can advocate for the appropriate services, and your child would be happy to know that what is going on, and that they're going to be okay, that they're going to get the appropriate services that they need to make sure that they can be the best version of themselves that they know that they can be. So I want to thank you for all of the support and tuning in each and every week. It is an honor to do these shows and to go out and provide the most relevant information to help each of you become the best partner in education that you can be. And until next week, we'll see you next time. And here's a word from our sponsors.
Learning Ally is a proud sponsor of the Empowered Dyslexia podcast. At Learning Ally, we are always looking for new ways to engage readers struggling with a reading deficit like dyslexia and help them work to their potential. Visit www.learningally.org to learn about the Learning Ally audiobook solution, including which of your students are eligible for access. If you live in Texas, we have great news. The Texas Education Agency provides access to the Learning Ally audiobook solution for all K-12 public and charter school students with reading deficits. Get started today by visiting www.learningally.org/Texas.